right, let's see. Here we are. All right, hold on one second. I need to check something. Okay, so yeah, we're going to do the sample midterm today. So now the sample midterm covers chapters 1 through 4. And once it's done, what I'll do is I'll post the actual exam on Moodle. Now, because it's a Friday, let me look at the calendar for a second. Let's see. Oh, you know what? I almost forgot. It would help if I shared the screen. All right, let's look at the old calendar here. I want to make sure everyone has plenty of time to do this. So since today is the 8th, it looks like. You know what, let's make it due on Monday the 18th. How about that? That way you got 2 full weekends. Now I know it's not going to take anything like that, but just in case you need it. And if you want to finish it early, that's fine. You can feel free to send it in. Now, I would like you to send it to my purchase account, if you can remember that. It's not life or death, but it would be a little easier for me just because my purchase account is much smaller and I don't have nearly as many emails in there. So well, you know my email address. It's on your syllabus, but so try to remember to send it to my purchase account email, which is alananderson or at purchase.edu. And when you're done with it, you should either use a scanning software or a physical scanner if you have one, or else take pictures of it with your camera. And just make sure I can read everything. All right, just take a look at it. Now, you'll probably have to do this in parts. In other words, each page may require a separate scan or separate photograph, and that's fine. You may end up with 6 or 8 different documents. If it seems like that's too much for a single email, then try splitting it up into different emails. Okay, if it works, it works. That's great. But if not, if it comes back to you and says, oh, sorry, there's not enough memory or something ridiculous like that, then what you can do is try to send it in smaller batches. And if you have trouble of any kind, just let me know, because this just isn't perfect. There's always going to be issues. No matter what we do, there's always problems with this system. So, you know, I just want to make sure that nobody's penalized because they tried to send their work in and it just wouldn't go through. And because that does occasionally happen. You never know. So anyway, so that means that you'll have time to do that. But in the meantime, let's go over the actual sample midterm. And just keep in mind, the actual test will be very much like this one. All right, so let's take a look at that. And first, let me get it open. So we have, let's see, where are we? Oh, I know where it is. All right, so this is sample midterm number 1. All right, here we go. So first, let me save it. Ten, 8, 21. Excellent. All right, here we go. Let's begin at the beginning. Now, these are the short answers. Now, with short answers, since you're writing English words and sentences, there's a lot of different ways of explaining these concepts. Unlike the word problems where there's realistically only one answer, here I can give you a lot of slack as long as you make it clear that you understand what this concept is all about. So, for example, the opportunity cost, you could say, among many things, this is the value of the best alternative that is sacrificed when a choice is made. right? So in the most general possible terms, that's what an opportunity cost is. Whatever you had to give up, there usually is more than one thing that you had to give up. The best thing you had to give up is what we consider our opportunity cost. So for example, if like right now, this hour and a half that we're spending with this, if you could have worked at a job and earned, let's say $15 or $20 or whatever, that could be considered the opportunity cost of attending this class. If that was the best you could do. Now, if the other alternative was to stay home and watch TV, well, you know, I mean, that's still an opportunity cost, but it's not in the same league as $15. I think you'll agree. But still, an opportunity cost is an opportunity cost. And we have to take into account no matter what decisions we decide to make. All right, now, returns of capital are known as interest. You might remember we discussed the different factors of production: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Each one has its own unique form of return, which is what the owner of this resource is paid in order to use it. Oh, okay. So if anyone just came in late, I was just saying how the actual midterm will be posted probably tonight on Moodle, and you can have until Monday the 18th to finish it, although you're not going to need anything like that kind of time, but I just want to make sure that there's no rush. So you'll also want to take pictures of your answers or else use a scanner or scanner software and then email everything back to my purchase email account. All right, that's all you missed. All right, now land provides us with rent. Okay, well, that one's pretty straightforward. Remember, the word land doesn't just mean land. It means anything like natural resources, just something in that neighborhood. Okay. All right, then. So what else do we have here? By the way, you know what? Let me just go back to Moodle for a second. I just want to double check something. Oh, there it is. Okay. I just wanted to make 100% sure that I actually posted this. All right. So there it is. Yes. Just in case you didn't see that it was posted. All right. Anyway, let's get back to this. What are the returns of labor known as? This is wages. Okay. Now, absolute advantage. What exactly is absolute advantage? Okay, now remember, this refers to international trade. This is the ability of a country to produce goods with fewer resources than other countries. Okay, so in other words, if remember, we saw some examples of this in the slides where let's say the US can make coffee with fewer resources than Brazil. We still might want to buy our coffee from Brazil because of the opportunity cost being so much higher in the US. But as far as the absolute advantage goes, it refers only to how many resources do you need to use to make this product. And then comparative advantage is the ability of a country to produce goods with lower opportunity costs than other countries. That's the key distinction here, lower opportunity costs rather than fewer resources. And so that's why it's possible for a country, a very small country, to actually have a comparative advantage in goods, even despite the fact that it's a much smaller country and has fewer resources. It still might be exceptionally good at making one good or other, and that gives it a comparative advantage. Anyway, so here we have David Ricardo. Remember that name. The economist David Ricardo is responsible for this idea. Now, which economic philosophy advocates restrictions on trade in order to acquire gold and silver? Okay, well, that would be mercantilism. Oops. There we go. Mercantilism. All right. Remember, that's what Adam Smith was reacting to when he wrote his book, The Wealth of Nations. He was saying how foolish that philosophy is because no countries will trade with each other if they feel like they're being exploited. But that's what mercantilism is all about, exploiting your trading partners in order to acquire their gold and silver. And that's why, you know, these countries are always at war with each other. And there's a reason for that, because they're trying to take advantage of each other. So opportunity costs on a straight line are constant, right? They don't change because it's a straight line. The slope never changes. Therefore, opportunity costs don't change. All right, now, what is the difference between a change in quantity demanded and a change in demand? So a change in quantity demanded results from a change in the price of the good. I'll put this in parentheses, it is reflected as a movement along the same demand curve. But on the other hand, what about a change in demand? A change in demand results from a change in one of the determinants of demand other than, well, all right, that's fine. In other words, it's everything else but the price, okay? It results from a change in one of the determinants of demand, and it is reflected, and I'm just throwing this in here. It doesn't specifically ask this, but it is reflected as a change or a shift of the entire demand curve. Okay, so in other words, in the second category, we have things like a change in income or a change in the price of substitutes. So any of those factors that we talked about, if they change, the entire curve will move, and that's known as a change in demand. The change in quantity demanded is just due to the price, only the price and nothing else. All right, and that means we're just moving up and down the same curve. All right, now, if consumer taste for a good increase, what happens to the equilibrium price and quantity? Now, for this one, you don't have to draw a picture, but you might want to think about it because it might make it easier to remember, because what's happening here is that tastes are going up. And so let's call this D1 because we're about to change it. I'll call that 1. So you can see what's happening because the demand increases, both the price and the quantity go up. All right, so in other words, for this one, you didn't have to draw the picture, but you can if you want to, just to help remember that both the equilibrium price and quantity increase. All right. Now, if the price of a substitute in production, now this is the tricky one. Substitute in production implies that we're talking about supply here. So remember what that means. Imagine that you're thinking about wheat and corn. Why are they substitutes in production? Because the farmer can grow both of these with the same resources, the same land, the same fertilizer. Obviously, it's a different kind of seed, but for all practical purposes, there's no difficulty whatsoever switching back and forth between wheat and corn. So because of that, just imagine a scenario where a good X, and this, I'm just making up this example right now. You don't need to do all this in your answer, but suppose that X is wheat. Corn is a substitute in production for wheat. If the price of corn increases, the farmer will want to grow more corn and less wheat. Therefore, supply of wheat, which is good X, will decrease. And the supply curve for wheat will shift to the left. All right, so let's remind ourselves what that looks like. So this time we're shifting S, so I'll call that S1 and S2. Point 1, point 2. Neaten that up a little bit. Q1, P1. Q1 and P2. All right, so this time the price went up, but the quantity went down. So in other words, we can still have wheat, but less is available, and therefore the price is higher. So the result is that the equilibrium price rises while the equilibrium quantity falls. All right. So your job now, of course, if you just put this line here, that's all we need. The rest of it is just to remind yourself how this works. Okay, so there was the official answers here. All of the rest of this was not absolutely necessary, but if you wanted to remind yourself what's changing and how, that might be a good idea. All right, so under what conditions will the equilibrium price and a quantity of a good both rise? Now, keep in mind here, as a rule of thumb, when demand changes, both the price and quantity either increase or decrease. When supply changes, the price and quantity move in opposite directions. Right, so if you look at the pictures, you'll see that that's exactly what's been happening. So as soon as you see that they both go up, therefore, if both the price and quantity increase, it must be true that demand has changed. So why don't we draw a picture and see what's going on here? So my suspicion is that the demand is going up. Okay, in order for both of these to rise, most likely the demand curve is shifted to the right. And so let's confirm that. All right, so we started here and we end up here. Point 1, point 2, and yes, our suspicions are confirmed here. So this means that if both the price and quantity increased, it must be true that demand has increased. Or in parentheses, the demand curve has shifted to the right. All right, so therefore, I mean, the answer is demand is increased. And that's all you really need. Okay, 14. Now here, under what conditions will the price rise, will the quantity fall? All right, so based on what we said earlier, since price and quantity are moving in opposite directions, the supply must have changed. All right, so let's try, and you know, if you're not sure, you can try them both. Let's just say that the supply decreases. Let's see what happens. My suspicion is that that's what we're looking for. So we go from here to here. Okay, so the supply curve shifted to the left, the quantity went down and the price went up. And that's exactly what it says. Under what conditions will the price rise, will the quantity falls? The conditions are that the supply has decreased, which means the supply curve has shifted to the left. All right, and that's really all you need. You can add the rest if you want, but this is what we need. Now, what effect does a price ceiling have on the price for a good? Or the market for a good? All right, so remember how that works. The price ceiling means you're setting a maximum price for a good, but that price is lower than the equilibrium price. So if this is our equilibrium price here, price ceiling would be, let's say, here. And so you see what's happening here at this low price, the quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied, which is a shortage. So the effect of a price ceiling is to create a permanent shortage of the good. Then the price floor must be the opposite. And that's exactly right. In other words, the price floor is the minimum price, but the price is above the equilibrium price. Otherwise, it wouldn't have an impact. It would be like having a minimum wage of $2 an hour. It would have no effect on the market. So instead, a price floor will only be set at a price above the equilibrium level, like here. All right, so we have a price floor. And here are the opposite cases. It is the opposite case. We've got the quantity supplied exceeds the quantity demanded, which leads to a surplus, which is permanent because the price system can't do its job. And so we can't adjust the prices and bring the market back in equilibrium. So that means that a price floor creates a permanent surplus. Of the good. Okay. All right, beautiful. Now here it says, what is an example of an inferior good? Well, you can use your imagination there. I mean, anything you can think of that you would buy less of when you have more income could work here. So let's just use, I don't know, how about grade 87 gas? A perfect example. Or how about generic drugs, store brands? the things that you normally only buy because you can't afford something better. Now, that doesn't mean these aren't good products, but in the public's mind, Tylenol is a better product than CVS painkiller, even though they may be chemically identical to each other. So people will probably switch to the more expensive Tylenol if their incomes start to rise. And if that's true, that makes it an inferior good. All right, and then finally we have absolute advantage, came from Adam Smith, who's in many ways the founder of the entire discipline of economics. Then we have what is true of points inside a production possibilities frontier. So remember, those are the ones that are inefficient. All right. Those are the ones that you do not want to operate at. The ones on the outside, you'd love to have them, but they're what we call unattainable, meaning that we don't have the resources that we need to reach them. All right, now we're ready to, what do you know, a production possibilities frontier. So why don't we do this? We can take a crack at drawing it. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece, just to get the sense of what it looks like. Okay, so, you can just sketch it out. Like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. The important thing, though, is if you look at it carefully, you'll notice it's clearly not a straight line. How can you tell? Because while we keep giving up the same amount of stakes as we move down from A to E, 0, 3, 6, 9, 12, we don't give up. Or actually, what I should say is we keep gaining the same amount of stake, but we don't sacrifice the same amount of hamburgers. So if there's a constant difference between the rows, that would represent a straight line, but we don't have that here, which indicates that it's a curve. Okay, now if you draw this by hand, it's not always easy to tell that, but that would be one tip-off that the differences between the rows are not constant. Therefore, it must be a curve. Now it says here somewhere that hamburger, yeah, just to make sure we're all on the same page, put hamburger here, steak here, and this is good enough. If you want to label the points, that's fine. Just like I said, this is not meant to be an engineering drawing class. As long as it's clear that you understand that this production possibilities frontier is curved, that's good enough. Now, as far as the calculations go, just remember that for any opportunity cost, I'll start by reminding you that when calculating an opportunity cost, we are calculating the ratio of how many units of one good are being sacrificed divided by how many goods or how many units of the other good are being gained. All right, so we're going to do, for B, we're going to do hamburger. Oh, actually, this shouldn't be here. Just tidying up. Let's move this up here. All right, so here we're calculating the opportunity cost. So we're going to need to look at the chart as we go along. So I'll split the screen. And let's, oh, wait, sorry, there's a chat up here. You will have access when we're done. I'm going to post this on Moodle. Yes, absolutely. So if you miss something, don't worry, it's all right here. This is exactly, that's why I'm being so careful with it. because I want to make sure that everything's in order when I post it. Okay. All right. Now, oh, yes, the screen. I don't know if you've ever seen this on Word before, but yes, you can split the screen. So you don't have to scroll up and down 100 times. Here we go. Okay, now remember, we need to do this. Right now, we're doing this with hamburger. So the opportunity cost of a hamburger represents the sacrificed steak over the gains hamburger. Now, if we're gaining hamburger, that implies that we're starting. Now, I have to be careful with this. The only way this can work is if we're starting at the bottom here in point E and working our way up to point A. So in other words, in order to be continuously gaining hamburgers, we have to start at E and move our way up towards A. So each time that we move from one point to the next, we're gaining burgers, but we're losing steaks. So you can think of the first one as, I think it's easier to think of E to D, I'm going to call it, meaning that as I move from E to D, if you look at the chart, you'll see that the sacrifice steak over the gained hamburger. Okay, so when I go from E to D, I'm losing 3 steaks. In fact, you can write it as 12 minus 9 over 0 plus 8. Okay, so in other words, if you look at the chart, to go from E to D, you're losing 3 steaks, but you're picking up 8 hamburgers. So this ratio is 3 over 8. If you prefer decimals, you can call it 0.375. Okay. So they're all going to work the same way. So now I'll do the same thing from D to C. I move up one more level. And so this time, I'm going from, the steak is going from 9 to 6. The hamburgers are going from 8 to 14. So that means we have 3 over 6, which is 0.5. All right, then we go from C to B with the sacrificed steak. Um, 6 minus 3, sorry about that. 8. 18 minus 14. 3 over 4. Okay. So in other words, when we go from C to B, the steak drops from 6 to 3. The burgers go from 14 to 18. So therefore, we gained 4 hamburgers when we sacrificed 3 steaks, and our opportunity cost is 0.75. Now, if you notice, as we're going along, the opportunity costs are increasing, and that's exactly what they should be doing. If not, that means you're doing something wrong. Okay, this time we go from 3 down to 0 steaks. The burgers jump up from 20 to 18 to 20. Okay, so those are the opportunity costs. And so therefore, That's all we need. But the key detail here is that as more burgers are produced, the opportunity cost in terms of sacrificed steak is increasing. Okay. And again, we did say before that when you have a curved production possibilities frontier, this is exactly what you get. It's not constant. Okay, that can only happen with a straight line. All right, now for part C, we're going the opposite direction. Okay, so let me just erase these two. Now we're going to calculate the opportunity cost of the steak. Okay, so in part C, all right, so we're going to change these formulas. First, let's note that in this case, the opportunity cost of steak is the reverse of what we had earlier. Sacrificed hamburger over gained steak. And so now that means we have to move in the opposite direction on this curve. Okay, in fact, I'm going to steal this diagram and show, well, actually, oh, not that one, this one. And just show you all we're doing is going in the opposite direction. Okay. So I'm going to reverse this arrow. There we go. Just to show that we're going in the opposite direction. Okay. Now that that's been established, the opportunity cost of steak is the sacrificed hamburger or the gained steak. So now, as we're going down the list, we'll start at A. So we'll do what we did here. In fact, I'm going to steal this one and then edit it. But in the meantime, I need to bring, I don't know what happened to the split. I need that chart to be visible to me at all times. Oh, here it is. All right, so let's do it. Okay, so we're going to start at A and move our way down to B. And now this time I'm changing this so that gained hamburger, sacrificed hamburger is divided by gained steak. All right, so these numbers will of course be different. When I go from A to B, how much hamburger am I losing? I'm dropping from 20 to 18, but the steaks, I'm gaining 3. So I've got 2/3. Oh, you know what? One more thing. I almost forgot to mention this. If you notice, these numbers are actually negatives. But if you notice, I left them out. We can ignore the negatives in a case like this. I just realized now, I see that I left out all. Well, actually, no, I did it this way on purpose, I guess. You do not want. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This one is wrong. This should have been 8 minus 0, sorry. You don't need the negatives. So what I did here is I wrote it this way so you can see that we don't have any negatives. It's the absolute change in one divided by the absolute change in the other, regardless of which one is negative and which one is positive. It's understood that these numbers are negative, but we can ignore them and just think of them as positive numbers. So therefore, I shouldn't have written it like this. Just to be consistent, let me write this as 20 minus 18. All right, now I can save a little time from B to C. I go from 18 to 14 with our burgers. And from 3 to 6 with the steaks. Oh, you know what else I forgot to do? I forgot to write the fraction. This is 2/3. Okay, much better. This is 4/3. All right, good. Now from C to D, the burgers dropped from 14 to 8. The steaks jump from 6 to 9. So I'm losing 6 burgers to gain 3 steaks, which is 2. And then when we go from D to E, in this last case, the hamburgers drop from 8 to 0. The steaks go from 9 to 12. And that leaves me with 8/3, which is approximately 2.667. All right, so if you notice, the opportunity cost as we produce more steak, the opportunity cost in terms of sacrificed hamburgers will increase. And again, that's what we'd expect when we have a curved production possibilities frontier. All right, you're not going to get constant opportunity costs unless the curve is a straight line. All right. So let's see. Let me highlight these. All right. I think that's good enough. Now, what is the impact of the following? Oh, here we go. So again, these are cases where we're changing either the supply or the demand. And, you know, if you can visualize this, that's fine, but you might want to draw a picture. So for example, here, we have, start with the first one, an increase in consumer taste. So that should be an increase in demand. And you can see they both went up. So while it doesn't ask you for the graphs, I think it's a good idea to draw one. And so the final answer is just that both the price and quantity increase. Okay, perfect. Now the increase, now the complement. Now this is a tricky one. Before you do anything, try to think about what this means. Suppose that good X is peanut butter and the complement is jelly. If the price of the jelly goes up, people will buy less peanut butter. And that's what we need to remember when we draw this one. So you can show the demand curve shifting to the left. Because it's easy, these are so easy to get confused with. This is one case where you might want to think of an example. It greatly reduces the risk of making a mistake. Oops, sorry, I drew that one backwards. So in other words, it's just the opposite of the previous case. If the demand going up causes both the price and quantity to increase, well, then it must be true that the opposite, a decrease in demand, will lead to the opposite. So here, both the price and quantity decreased. Okay, or decrease, whatever. Now, for substitutes, again, you should think of an example. Suppose that good X is Coke and the price of Pepsi increases. People will buy more Coke as a result. All right, so this is a repeat of the first case. The demand curve shifts to the right. And you don't have to draw these pictures every time or at all, really, unless it asks for one. But I like the idea that you're getting a lot of practice. All right, so the price, as you can imagine, goes up, as does the quantity. Okay, so both the price and quantity increase. All right, now a reduction in the price of input. So imagine here that suppose good X is pizza and the cost of cheese falls. Then the supply of pizza will increase. And in parentheses, I'll note because pizza is now cheaper to make. All right, so let's see how that looks. Okay, so we have an increase in supply due to the lower cost of production. Prices drop. Wow, this is a nice outcome. We have more pizza at lower prices. Who wouldn't be happy about that? All right, so this is that case that everybody loves. More pizza, lower prices. So the price falls and the quantity rises. Excellent. Now, what term is used to describe the situation when the quantity demanded exceeds the quantity supplied? This is a shortage, okay? People want to buy more of the product than is being made available to them. On the other hand, what about the other opposite case? When the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded, this is a surplus. Means there's more being produced than people want to buy at that price. And see, what is the relationship between quantity supplied and demanded in equilibrium? In this case, quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. All right, now here we're looking at factors that increase the demand for a product. Now it specifically specifies here that it's a normal good. Now, if you're not sure, we can go back to chapter 4. And, when you're at home like this, you will have access to all your notes. So that kind of makes things a little smoother. So just a quick reminder, this is the list. Tastes and preferences, consumer incomes, prices of related goods, meaning substitutes and complements, expectations of the future price of the good, number of consumers in the market, and incomes and or credit. Well, you were only supposed to do 3 of them, but I'm going to type 6 of them anyway. So just be careful, because here we're saying that it increases. So therefore, that would mean an increase in the taste for the good. An increase in consumer income, it's because it's a normal good. Now, here's a tricky one: increase in the price of substitutes, or a decrease in the price of complements. An increase in the expected future price of the good. The number of consumers in the market for the good increases, and incomes or credit increase. Okay, so any of those any 3 of those are fine. If any of those happen, the demand curve will shift to the right, and that would be considered an increase. Oh no, oh my God, I just realized I misread it. Oh my God, I apologize for that. I just realized I wrote them all backwards because sorry about that. So that means I have to make them all backwards. That's what I get for not reading it. So here it would be a decrease in the price of a substitute, or an increase in the price of complements, a decrease. Yeah, they're all backwards. All right, good thing I noticed it. The number of consumers decreases, and incomes or credit decrease. All right, now it works. So decrease in the taste, decrease in income, decrease in the price of substitutes, or increase in the price of complements, decrease in expected future price, number of consumers decreases, or incomes and credit decrease. All right. Oh, let me just check something. Yep. Okay. We're good. All right. So now how about the opposite? What about it, or I shouldn't say the opposite, decrease the supply of a good. So the goods, the factors that we're looking for are also in this chapter. There should be 6 of them, I believe. Well, all right, I've got them here anyway. All right, they're in there somewhere. So here we go. So we have, now this first one is kind of strange. I mean, technology normally doesn't go backwards, but if it did, you know, normally this one we don't really even consider it, but if somehow technology went backwards, that would also decrease the supply of a good. The cost of the factors of production increases. There is an increase in the price of substitutes in production or an increase, or sorry, a decrease in the price of complements in production. The price of a good is expected to increase in the future. The number of producers of the good decreases. And finally, the weather deteriorates. Yes, the weather is part of this. Why? Well, you know, a lot of products are, of course, agricultural products. So, you know, for them, clearly, if the weather is really rough, a lot of products become more expensive. In particular, like we've had recent shortages of vanilla and chocolate, and that drove up their prices quite considerably because there was bad weather in the countries that grow them. It's just that simple. But now for other products, it's not such a big deal, but you never know. Like, for example, recently, you know, we had a lot of flooding in different parts of the country, and that certainly would have affected the supply of any goods that were being produced in those areas, regardless of whether they're directly related to agriculture. You know, let me go back here. It's really annoying that I can't find the list. Here, this has to be it. There, yeah, here we go. All right. So technology input prices, meaning the cost of the factor of production. Oh, Bailey, yes, go ahead.
I just have a question. I noticed that this session is being recorded, and I was wondering, since I came in late, if this is going to be on the YouTube channel.
Oh, sure, they're all recorded and put on YouTube. Yeah, it might not happen until tonight or tomorrow, but yes, this recording will definitely be made available to you.
Okay, awesome. I just wanted to make sure I was getting
Sure.
everything down.
Yeah, no, you're right. If you miss something, the recordings will be always there in my YouTube account. So yes, I would never forget to record these sessions. Yeah, this is a very important thing, because this is one area where when you're in the classroom, I mean, if you're not there, you're not there and you just miss it. But here at least we have recordings, which is kind of nice. So there's something good about all this. Anyway, what happens to the price of a good is there's a shortage, the price rises. And if there's a surplus, the price falls. Which, you know, when you think about it, if there's a shortage, it means that the producers can raise the price and people will pay the higher price for the product. If there's a surplus, it's the other way around.
Was Brandon. In the very beginning, him and I were talking, I was just like, all right, man, you're not act till the end. We're just gonna keep voting the same person.
You did what? Oh, okay. Oh, I thought somebody was trying to ask me a question. Maybe not. All right. Anyway, here we are. So let's get back to it. What's left? There isn't that. Oh, here we go. Now this one, oh, here we go. Show graphically. So here you're being asked to actually draw some graphs. Okay. They're not hard, but you know, now you really do have to draw some pictures. And so let's try them. So for example, an improvement in technology means that supply goes up. Now that's the key to the whole thing, knowing which curve is shifting and in which direction. Oops. So it's not actually asking you for any conclusions. It's just saying, please show what happens when there is an increase in supply. And you can see the supply curve shifts to the right. And of course, you can see for yourselves that the price drops and the price quantity goes up. That's always our favorite outcome. Part B, there's an increase in the number of consumers which means the demand will go up. So we'll show that. Whoops, sorry. This is 1 and this is 2. So unlike with the supply, when the demand goes up, the quantity goes up, but the price also goes up because more people want to buy a product for which there's a limited supply. Okay, so in part A, it was an increase in demand, supply, because of the improvement in technology. In part B, there are more consumers in the market, so the demand goes up. In part C, we're being told that there's an increase in consumer tastes. So C and D are identical to each other. In fact, I'm actually going to just copy this picture. That's the nice thing about doing this on Word instead of the blackboard, all right, or the whiteboard. There's an increase in demand because consumer tastes went up. People want more of this product for whatever reason. And D, is the case where there's an increase in the price of a complement in production. We gotta have to think about that one. So remember what that means. Complements in production are produced with the same process. For example, apples and apple cider. I would consider those to be, could be thought of as complements in production. Because you can't have apple cider without picking apples. I mean, of course. So you can sell your apples as they are if you're a farmer, or you can turn them into apple cider. So imagine if Good X is apples and the complement in production is apple cider. So the, two P's. They're saying here that there's an increase in the price of the complement. All right, so in other words, the price of apple cider rises. So what that means then is that they will want to produce more apples to take advantage of the rise in the price of apple cider. All right, so even though there's no change in the demand for apples, because we can make apple cider out of those apples, if there's a stronger demand for the apple cider, then it makes sense to produce more apples. In other words, I guess we should say harvest more apples. We don't make apples, we harvest them. We go out there and we pick them out of the trees, but we want to do more of that because we can make more money with the apple cider. So the bottom line is the supply of apples increases. All right, so let's show that graph. Actually, didn't we already have that one? Yes. Oh, well, there you go. We're in luck today. I can borrow that one too without drawing it all over again. So yeah, it's the same as the previous one. In other words, the supply increases. So we may as well take advantage of that. And you can do the same thing too on your assignment. I mean, if you've got a couple of the same results like this, go right ahead and copy and paste it. All right. Now, this one, it looks like it's going to be very, very scary, but it really isn't. I've kept the complications down to a minimum. We're looking at England and Portugal again. This is David Ricardo's classic example of comparative advantage. This is what he was writing about in his book, England and Portugal. And if you recall, this is the early 1800s. So England is the top manufacturer in the world. Portugal is really primarily an agricultural economy, and they grow amazing wine. Okay. So, but based on these numbers, who has the absolute advantage in the production of cloth? So that comes down to who can make cloth with the fewest hours of labor. So since England can produce cloth with only 1 hour of labor, while Portugal requires 3 hours of labor, England has the absolute advantage in the production of cloth. Okay, it's just simple. Who can make it with the fewest hours of labor? All right, now, as far as the wine is concerned, now, interestingly enough, now, this is an example. In the real world, this is probably not true, but England can also make it with fewer hours of labor as well. Now, most likely, the reason for this is that the English have more machinery that can help with the process. Whereas in Portugal, they're doing this entirely by hand. Okay, so remember, this is the outbreak of the Industrial Revolution. The English are by far the most powerful country on earth. Manufacturing is what they do the best. And so even though their soil isn't so great for wine growing, and it's an open question which one will have the higher quality, but still, since England can produce wine with only 3 hours of labor, while Portugal requires 4 hours of labor, England has the absolute advantage in the production of wine. Now, you might think because they have the absolute advantage in both goods that there's no trade that can take place here, but it's actually not true. So because what we really want to do is focus on comparative advantage. So for England, producing 1 hour of cloth, 1 yard of cloth requires the sacrifice of, now here's the big question, how much wine do they have to give up? Well, not much. If they can make a yard of cloth with an hour of labor and a gallon of wine requires 3 hours, that means that hour of making cloth only costs them the opportunity to make 1/3 of a gallon of wine. And I'll note in parentheses here, because producing a yard of cloth requires 1 hour, while 1 hour of labor can only produce 1/3 of a gallon of wine. Okay, so that's the opportunity cost. In other words, the opportunity, I mean, it's the same thing as saying the opportunity cost is 1/3. Now, what about Portugal? They're saying 1 yard of cloth whoops, 1 yard of cloth requires the sacrifice of, all right, now for them, a yard of cloth requires 3 hours. Those same 3 hours could be used to produce 3/4 of a gallon of wine. Okay. And that's because producing a yard of cloth requires 3 hours of labor, while 1 gallon of wine, sorry, 3 hours of labor, I should say, can only produce 3/4 of a gallon of wine. So what we have to do is say, well, England has the lower opportunity cost in the production of cloth. Therefore, it has the comparative advantage in cloth. Well, now we're going to do the opposite. We're going to do the same thing with wine. Now, I'm going to give you a helpful hint here. Note, the opportunity costs for producing wine will be the inverse of the opportunity cost of producing cloth. So for example, in England, producing 1 gallon of wine requires 3 hours of labor, which could be used to produce 3 yards of cloth. So you see what I mean? The opportunity cost of wine is 3 yards of cloth, which is the inverse of 1/3. Okay. Now for Portugal, producing 1 gallon of wine requires 4 hours of labor, which could be used to produce. So if you look at this chart, with 4 hours, they could have made 4/3 of a yard of cloth. Okay. So the opportunity cost of wine. And by the way, remember up here, their opportunity cost was 3/4. Now it's 4/3. So they're just inverses. So the opportunity cost of the wine is 4/3 yards of cloth. All right, so you can see here the advantage swings back to Portugal now. Portugal has the comparative advantage, lower opportunity cost in the production of wine. Therefore, it has the comparative advantage in the production of wine. So in other words, you can see it seems like a paradox. England actually is capable of producing both goods with fewer hours of labor, and yet the opportunity costs are different in the two countries, which means that at the bottom line here in the last two questions, which country should specialize in the production of cloth? That would be England. And for the wine, that would be, of course, Portugal. Now, what will happen to the output of wine and cloth if they specialize in the good in which they have a comparative advantage? Well, we don't have to calculate the exact amount, but the total output of both wine and cloth will increase if each country specializes in the good in which it has a comparative advantage. All right. That's all you need to know. As long as one of them has a comparative advantage in each good, if they specialize in that good, the total output will increase. Now, if we knew how much labor each country had, we could figure out the exact amount, but we don't. So it's enough to note that we'll get more of both as a result of this. All right. Well, that was pretty intense, I must say. The actual test won't be this long. I mean, this was just meant to be a review. Hold on one second. I just realized there's no page numbers here. One of the irritating things about Word is that they do not assume that you want page numbers unless you ask for them. I think it should be the other way around, but they don't listen to me. All right. So does anybody have any questions? All right. Are you feeling worn out from all this? Now, hopefully none of this came as a surprise to you. I mean, as long as you're able to follow along here, you should study this, of course, and make sure you understand what we did. But, you know, the actual test will be basically a smaller version of this because it was meant to be done in class in about an hour and a half. So, you know, think of this as sort of like a worst case scenario. It'll be very much like this. If you understand these concepts, you'll have no trouble at all. So sometime tonight, I'll post these solutions and the actual test. And then next week, we'll just get back to the new content, which was inflation. Intense but helpful. Yes, that's what I was aiming for. Intense but helpful. In other words, I try to cover everything. That way, there's no surprises when you see the actual test. And, you know, since you'll have all that time, you can always send me emails if you have questions or if something's not clear, if you're not sure about something. Those you can certainly send me emails, or else we can discuss it further on Tuesday in class. No problems there. Or the following Friday, which is fine. So the idea here is just to make sure you understand what we're doing and that you, you know, if you understand what we're doing, you should do very well. That's all we can ask for. There's no surprises. There's nothing coming out of left field. Do you understand or not? Yes or no? So I think the answer is yes. So let's just prove it by, you know, doing a good job in the test. And if you're having technical issues, yes, make sure I know right away if there's some reason why your email is not working, or if you can't seem to get a good copy of your work or anything along those lines, just let me know so that we can get it straightened out right away. All right. Yes, Devin. Go ahead.
We can find your email on Moodle, the purchase
It's in
email.
there. Yeah, it's just my name. It's let me write it down here somewhere. It's if you go to the syllabus, it's there. It's just exactly what you would expect. I mean, just yeah, if you've never sent anything to it, that's all you need to remember. Just my name. That's how all the emails are supposed to work at purchase, but you never know. If you have like two middle names or a hyphenation or something, you never know what might happen. But for most names, it's just your first dot last name and then at purchase.edu. And you know, like I said, if you forget and send it to my Gmail, like regular Gmail account, that's fine. I'll find it. It's just that it's easier if they're all together in one place. Also, you know what you should do too? When you send me a bunch of files, like I said, try not to cram them all. I mean, if you put them into one email and it refuses to deliver it, try to just put fewer documents in each email. That might be what the problem is. If it just won't work at all, then we may have to use Google Drive, which I don't really completely understand how it works. So we'll save that as a last resort, but that one will give you access to much larger storage. In other words, nothing's really being physically delivered. It's just that it's being put in a place where I can see it. So if your documents are too big, we'll probably have to use Google Docs, but let's just say that, let's try to save that as a last resort. Okay. I hope you'll be able to send them all back to me. All right. Anything else? Okay, good. So I guess it's late. We might as well stop right here. I don't think you're in the mood to do something new right now. We'll pick it up with our discussion about inflation next week. We have a lot more fun videos, and I'll see you then. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Have a good weekend.
Later.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye.